Well, Mike Zullo, listen, let's redeem the time, because I know that you're going to want to lay a foundation to this story, because what's going to happen, Mike, it's my understanding from the conversations that we've had before the program, that the people that are listening are going to hear a lot of things about Dennis Montgomery, the CIA contract worker and now whistleblower, who has been a figure in the midst of this, of the latter part of the birth certificate investigation, because he brought information to you and made allegations that were astounding. And you're going to give some insight and information about Dennis Montgomery and his part in this that our audience and America has never heard before, more than likely. But let me set it up this way, Mike. So on June the 7th, just a couple of weeks ago, there was an interview that's now, I think it's in two parts on YouTube. There was an interview that was conducted between the radio host Dr. Dave Janda of Operation Freedom, and he brought on two former NSA officials, now whistleblowers, William Binney and J. Kirk Wiebe. Now, it's my understanding that you know both of these guys. Is that right, Mike?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
Okay, Binney and Wiebe. And I know you've talked about them, I believe, on our show before, I do believe, in years past. Yeah. And Dr. Dave Janda, I don't know him. I know who he is now because I've watched the videos. Did you know him prior to this?
I did not. I don't know him. I don't follow his channel. It was the first time I really ever sat down and watched anything. Yeah,
same with me. Nothing disparaging towards Dr. Janda. I'm just saying, prior to all this, I did not know who he was. But anyway, so these two whistleblowers have been interviewed, and they're basically saying that former NSA and CIA contractor Dennis Montgomery may possess information about government surveillance worthy of investigation. Well, that sounds good. The problem is that's not what they have always claimed. And you and I find this odd, and we're not making any allegations unless you want to today, because I know you've done a whole lot more research on this and made phone calls and spoken with some of the players, and I have not. But as far as I know, we're not making any allegations towards these guys specifically, but it does strike it as, it does smack of being odd to you and me that as we're now moving into the, quote, investigating of the investigators after the Mueller report, Donald Trump is saying this goes all the way perhaps to Obama. It certainly goes to Brennan. It goes to Mueller. It goes to Comey. It goes to the Obama DOJ, the whole deep state lying to FISA court judges and fake documents and dossiers. And, of course, you and I know all about a fake document, a birth certificate. And of course, Trump knew all about that, along with Arpaio at about the same time back in 2011. So you've got all those deep state connections to this whole thing. In the middle of it comes Dennis Montgomery. And then in the middle of all of that comes these guys, Binney and Wiebe, who are whistleblowers from the NSA, who sometime back tried to make the case that Dennis Montgomery basically was a fraud, and now they're coming out, strangely, now, when it looks like this birth certificate thing's getting ready to come to the forefront, I mean, from high up in the federal government, now these guys are on this show kind of singing his praises in one sense. So anyway, that's the introduction. If I said anything wrong, please correct me. But Mike, why don't you just set this whole thing up, remind people what you said before, give people the foundation of this, and then of course you're sitting on top of some. You've been in contact with these guys, so you've got some firsthand information. Just give our audience a rundown of what's happening in this brand new development.
Well, Carl, like you said, there was this. I don't know what you call it, a podcast, YouTube video from this Dr. Dave Janda. And he had Kurt Wiebe and Bill Binney on as two creditable former NSA employees that blew the whistle on illegal surveillance back in the early 2000s. And these are the very two individuals, including a third, Thomas Drake, that during the Seattle investigation, it was called, at the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, where Dennis Montgomery ended up being a confidential informant for the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, giving us information about clandestine surveillance and acquisition of documentation on American citizens that violated Fourth Amendment protections. He had, at that point in time, giving us, in a very first encounter with him, I believe it was either 3 or 6 thumb drives worth of information. In addition, later on, he produced 47 hard drives, terabyte hard drives, that he had claimed had very secret, top secret, classified information that he had accumulated while he was an employee as a contractor for the CIA, building surveillance apparatus, surveillance software, hacking software, and collected information surreptitiously on behalf of the United States government. Now, we're in those possessions of those hard drives for about 7 or 8 months as this investigation was unfolding.
Mm-hmm.
And with that came this, quote, warning that there was top secret information on these.
Yeah, I remember that.
So the sheriff's office went at extremes to safeguard these hard drives.
Yes.
During this investigation, as a matter of fact, I personally, accompanied by Detective Brian Makowitz, we drove those hard drives from Seattle to Phoenix, Arizona.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how much we believe what was on those hard drives needed to be protected.
Yeah, under heavy armament.
Oh yeah, it truly was.
Yes, I know.
Including Dennis Montgomery, we drove him too to come in for what's known as a free talk with the state of Arizona's Attorney General at the time.
Yeah,
and some of the information he gave us there was mind blowing, and I have to preface this: things that Montgomery told us in 2013. Mm-hmm. are in fact happening today.
Today, that's right. Names really and players and organizations and everything, yeah.
There is a complete timeline, Carl, that you can put together: names, times, events, and locations.
Yeah.
And all of this would be easily corroborated by any federal investigator.
Right.
It's just hands down simple.
Right.
And the very names are the names that you're seeing in the news today.
Yes.
Going after the President of the United States.
Right.
As this unfolded with Montgomery, the first batch of information, those thumb drives he gave us, a lot of that information did prove to be, quote, creditable.
Uh-huh.
What ended up happening over time is, as this was going forward, I became suspicious that the 47 hard drives that he had supplied us, I was starting to become suspicious that they were going to be nothing but junk.
Uh-huh.
And as this was unfolding towards the end of that investigation, I went to Sheriff Arpaio along with Brian Makowitz, and I petitioned the sheriff, and we took a big risk. I explained my position, and I explained to Sheriff Arpaio that, look, we have these hard drives. We don't know what's on these, if anything. And I said, I think what we should do is see if we can get some assistance in at least cracking a couple of these open to see what exactly is on here. And as I was contemplating this, I did locate Bill Benny, Kurt Wiebe, and Thomas Drake. And I asked the sheriff for permission to contact them to see if they would assist us. Mm-hmm. Well, ultimately we do, and ultimately they agree. So we take these 47 hard drives and we take them to Maryland, and we have a series of meetings with Wiebe, Drake, and Benny. And let me tell you, let me just be straight up front. Those three individuals are stand-up American patriots.
Okay.
And anything that I'm going to say from this point forward is not disparaging towards any one of them.
Okay.
They have paid a huge price.
Yes, they have.
For blowing the whistle on this. Thomas Drake was prosecuted.
Yeah, and not only are you saying that on the air, but you've said that in print as well. And Mike, listen, we're up against a break, but when we come back, I'm going to let you pick up right here so that you can keep unpacking where you're going. Don't forget where you are. Folks, don't forget where you are, and this is why you listen to Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups on Talk WEBY 1330 AM, 99.1 FM on the Gulf Coast, because you won't hear this anywhere else. We'll be gone for 2 minutes. Come back. Mike Zullo's going to pick it up right here.
Don't change that dial. We're just getting started. Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups, the Oval Office of Gulf Coast Talk Radio.
Okay, welcome back, folks, and welcome back, Mike Zullo. So, Mike, you were just, when we had to so rudely interrupt you and go to a break, you were just saying that Wiebe and Benny and Drake, all of these former NSA guys, you met with them in Maryland, and you're getting ready to unpack what happened then, what's happening now, how it all fits together. And you just made the statement that these guys are patriots. They've served their country honorably and reputably. You're going to unpack this whole story, though, and you just made the statement that what you have to say from this point forward is the truth as far as you see it and know it and understand it, and that you're not being disparaging towards anyone. You're just going to let our audience know the end and beginning, the black and the white. Go ahead from there.
Well, let me just back up one quick second. Drake, and Benny are the developers of a mass data harvesting program known as Thin Thread. And they built this for the, I believe it was the NSA, and they did it with Fourth Amendment protections in it. All the information was encrypted.
All right, tell people what that means, Fourth Amendment. Just tell people what that means, the Fourth Amendment protection.
In other words, nobody has the right to see your private bank accounts, your email correspondence, your telephone conversations. They have no right to any of it. Normally, to see any of that, law enforcement would have to get a warrant.
Okay, so in other words,
that's precisely how they did this.
Okay, so in other words, they developed this hacking program, but the program itself only worked if you had a warrant. You couldn't just look at Carl Gallups and Mike Zullo's stuff. You had to have warrants in that program called Thin Thread. And Wiebe and Benny and Drake are the developers of that, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And my understanding, and I believe it's factually correct because it's been borne out in certain testimony, is the NSA, I believe at that time under General Michael Hayden, they took that program and they prostituted it to a point where there was no more Fourth Amendment protections in it. Now they were just mass harvesting, and it was taking what everyone thought was encrypted data and just computer hieroglyphics into readable documents where anybody could read anything that you were saying, sending, or texting. I mean, it was just a illegal mass harvesting operation. And this is what prompted Wiebe, Drake, and Benny, and I think a few others, to come forward as whistleblowers because they built their program to protect this country during the War on Terror.
Yeah. But
they built it also to protect the American citizen.
Yes.
And that was being violated, and that pushed them forward. So now that you understand the background, this is going to become important later on. When we take those hard drives over to Maryland and we ask them to look at them, we first showed them some of the information that was on the thumb drives. And during that time, even they said, look, we don't have source information on how this was obtained, but it definitely has been obtained through some form of breaching.
Mm-hmm.
So that gave Montgomery some credibility. But we get to the hard drives, and Detective Makowitz actually became ill. He got food poisoning that morning.
I remember
and I
that.
actually had to drive him there, and that poor guy was on the couch, sick as a dog, with one eye open watching this. And I had to sit with Kurt Wiebe, Tom Drake, as we were opening these hard drives.
Mm-hmm.
And we were under explicit orders from Chief Deputy Jerry Sheridan of the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office that if there was anything that even resembled being privileged, we were to mark the drive, seal the box, and go to the FBI and not leave the FBI until we told them what we had.
Right.
So we're under those orders, and there's no way you violate that kind of order.
Right.
We start going through the hard drives, and it became comical. They were nothing but complete garbage. There was nothing classified on those at all.
Mm-hmm.
So they were junk.
Mm-hmm.
And that term is the term that Sheriff Arpaio used later on in a civil proceeding where a judge in the Melendez trial, or Judge Snow, decided he wanted to have a special trial, an investigatory trial on this Seattle investigation. And under questioning, Sheriff Arpaio said that the information was junk.
Right.
And that has seemed to be the focal point of the media.
Right. But there's a
However,
context. But there's a
testimony-
context to everything. A context. Go ahead.
Right. In my testimony, I said not all the information
Right.
that Montgomery gave us was junk.
Correct.
And nobody pressed the issue. They just kept focusing on these 47 hard drives, obviously to destroy Montgomery's credibility.
Sure.
So we had asked Wiebe and Drake to write a report for us and telling us what they found. We went back to the sheriff's office knowing it was garbage. I don't know if it was a week later or something to that effect. They write a report to us, and it is scathing. There's a scathing report. And I believe there's a copy of it in a link somewhere. But the conclusion in the bottom of the report said that they believe, based on what they saw, that Dennis Montgomery is a fraud and a con man and just trying to rip the government off for money.
Right.
Well, when I saw that, I was horrified.
Right.
Because there's no way you can deduce that from the information we gave you to examine.
Right. So why would they say that?
And,
yeah.
Well, I don't know the answer to that, but I can tell you, as investigators, you don't call somebody up and say, hey, you need to change your report.
Right.
The evidence is what the evidence is, and their report is what their report says. That shut down this investigation right then and there.
I remember that.
There was no more relationship between the sheriff's office and Montgomery. However, I was tasked with monitoring Montgomery for another 12 months because we were trying to get him to the FBI.
Right. Okay, you've got 45 seconds in this segment. Go ahead.
So as this is all going on now, this is where this thing has remained. On top of, we did get Montgomery to a federal judge. I'll have to address that later. But now there's Dave Janda, who's got a show on, and he's got Wiebe and Vinny on there. And they've kind of reversed position, saying they believe Montgomery to be creditable.
Yes.
And that flies in the face of the written report they gave the sheriff's office.
Right. And that's the mystery, and that's what we're going to unpack in the next few moments, folks. Mike Zullo, the lead investigator under Joe Arpaio, who was former sheriff of Maricopa County, of the Obama fraud case, the birth certificate case, which has been proven now to be a forensic fraud, a fabrication, a big fat lie, signed off on by 2 international forensics examination companies. We'll talk about all that, but when we come back, more with Mike Zullo. He's going to keep unpacking this. Don't go anywhere. He still doesn't know.
Former Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon has died, aged 80.
We are with one of Rabbi Kaduri's disciples.
והצלחה רבה ומהירה בתוך ביס משיח צדקנו בקרוב ממש ואז ישפיע זה על כל כדור